We'll begin with our motivation. So tonight we'll be talking about the correct view, the last of the three principal aspects of the path, and the one that we want to develop insight into. And it takes a great deal of merit and inner strength to realize emptiness, or even to gain a correct understanding. If it were easy to do this, we all would have done it already and be out of cyclic existence. So it really challenges our ideas of who we are, how we think things exist. It rattles our conceptions of what we think the world is. But that's actually quite good, because our conceptions are mistaken. So rattling the wrong conceptions is loosening their grip and inching us towards the correct view. So let's remember that we're trying to gain the correct view, not simply for our own awakening, our own liberation from samsara, but so that we'll have all the skills and wisdom and compassion necessary to lead others in that direction as well. So we approach this topic with deep refuge in the Buddha Dharma Sangha, and also deep compassion for other living beings who, like us, are befuddled by their ignorance and trapped in samsara. Like I said, this topic, she can't tell time very well. Yeah? Very interesting. She has a very difficult time telling time, even though I tell her the right thing, and she writes it down, but she beeps at the wrong time. Anyway, just as the topic of emptiness, rattles things, you can see, this morning when we were talking about, or in the last few days when we've been talking about restructuring the Abbey and, our departments and things, and how there's a little bit of like, oh, well, who am I going to be, and what am I going to have to do, and will I like it, and what's up, and who has the power to do this, and do I have any say in it? And so just looking at that reaction in our own mind, we can see that there's grasping at inherent existence, because we're thinking that there's a real me that could either be happy or be miserable by the restructuring of our jobs. And you can see the grasping at inherent permanence, because whatever our jobs were, we thought, this is what I'm always going to have. This is not going to change. What do you mean I'm not going to be the office manager? What do you mean I'm not going to do offering service? What do you mean I'm you're putting me to do that job, And you can see, here it is in live technicolor, the object of to be negated. So there's this theme of kind of seeking stability, predictability, and so on in samsara, and not being able to get it. So it's interesting because Ken Mandal, he writes these little stories that we put on the web. So he just, this last week, wrote one about this that I thought I would read to you, because it's kind of a prelude to studying about emptiness. Okay, so the title of the story is Yes, But. Okay. So he says, a very basic Buddhist teaching is that all sentient beings are constantly striving for happiness and freedom from suffering. This happiness can be defined in many ways, such as a sense of peace, contentment, serenity, purpose, and fulfillment. I also believe that for many people, happiness would be described as a sense of security, reliability, predictability, and stability. As children, we are certainly looking for these qualities. No? In fact, multiple studies have shown that children who grow up in situations lacking that loving and nurturing security often have deep psychological issues. I was fortunate to have 2 loving parents, although I never quite forgave them for getting rid of my blankie. I guess at the age of 15, it was time. But that soft, cuddly object gave me a tremendous sense of security. As adults, we never quite grow out of that need for security, reliability, predictability, and stability. Gee, you'd think he lived here and he was spying on us or something. We look for these qualities in our relationships, jobs, activities, and identities. How often have we been deeply disappointed when something that we thought would last forever doesn't? But we continue to search on and on, hoping to find something that we can truly rely upon, something that can give us security in a very unpredictable, insecure world. Perhaps this is where religion comes in. For some, a belief in God is very satisfying. It fulfills that need to find something larger than ourselves that is permanent and reliable, something we can take refuge in. So, what about us Buddhists? How can we fulfill our basic human desire for security, reliability, predictability, and stability in a world that is changing moment by moment, where everything is empty of inherent existence? I have studied emptiness for several years and believe I understand the basic principles, at least conceptually. I have no argument with the logic and reasoning behind the fact that nothing exists inherently, independently, or from its own side. Everything depends on causes and conditions, parts, and is merely conceived and designated in dependence upon those parts. Yet, I still long for something that is secure and permanent. One part of me says everything is empty of inherent existence, while another part of me says, yes, but I want something anyway. Perhaps that is why all the lower tenet systems of Buddhism recognize dependent arising, but still believe in inherent existence. Unlike the Prasangikas, the lower tenet systems couldn't make that final connection between dependent arising and emptiness. We are taught to take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Yet I say to myself that even the Buddha is no longer with us, and the Sangha, in parentheses, Sravasti Abbey, is changing moment by moment and will not last forever. And what about the Dharma? There will be periods of time when the teachings will not be given. But what will never disappear are the principles. the basic rules of the universe. Principles of impermanence, principles of impermanence, dependent arising, emptiness, karma, and its effects, and suffering due to ignorance. These principles are always present, even if the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha are not with us. Perhaps this is what I can hold on to for security. Truth, knowledge, and wisdom can be my adult blankie. Keeping these principles in mind and living by them can provide me with something reliable and predictable in a world that is anything but reliable and predictable. Interesting, isn't it? Yeah? To think that the truth of the Dharma and the principles that the things we're trying to train our mind in, they may be impermanent, but they're reliable and predictable and secure, and they're always going to work and never disappoint us. And so even though learning them brings up this grasping, which causes us to feel insecure, and living in the middle of unpredictability, that actually once we accustom ourselves to these Dharma values, which are basically the way things exist. It's not something the Buddha made up. It's the way things are. But the more we can take refuge in those things, and trust those things because we've really believed them, and we have not just believed them conceptually, but have some experience of accepting them, then that itself can provide the feeling of security. So it's kind of like if we take this one principle he said at the beginning, everybody wants happiness and nobody wants suffering. And if we really marinate our mind in that and really accept that at a deep level, then whenever we meet any sentient being, there's not going to be a sense of fear or anxiety. There's going to be a sense of, connection with this being because we know something very deep about them. And that's, it's us accustoming ourselves with how things are, both on the conventional level and on the ultimate level, and that can be our blankie. It's nice, huh? Yeah. But you can see how in the process, we're all attracted to the Dharma. But yet, when we hear the teachings, there's certain teachings that just push our buttons like mad. And our mind just goes, no! And when we think about it, we may say, oh, that makes complete sense. But then when we try and accept it on a deeper level, our mind goes, no, I want this. Do you ever see that in yourself? So, So sticking with it, familiarizing ourselves with the truth, and then let that be what we take refuge in, what provides security and reliability and stability for us. So if something's shaking because your job and your position at the Abbey may change, then just recognize, this is my grasping at true existence. That's all it is. And you can see how that grasping makes us miserable. Yeah. You can see it every May when we change rooms. Like, oh no, I'm used to this room. I have to move to another room, and I can't take my blankets with me, and I can't take my bookshelf with me, and I can't take the little mat at the foot of my bed with me, and and I'm going to be in another room. It's in the same building, but it's another room, and maybe I'm living with another person, and that person's going to see everything I do. They're even going to know what I look like when I sleep, when I'm like, ugh. What are they going to think of me then? And they're going to know when I oversleep. And they're going to know if I get up in the middle of the night and pee. Oh, I don't want people to know all that private, hidden, secret, profound information about me. I have my reputation to protect, after all. Yeah? So, yeah, just grasping into existence. So, we have to learn to laugh at this. Okay. So, last week we were talking about, we were doing the section about dependent arising and emptiness in the Gomchen Lamrim. And so I was reading from what His Holiness, and some of this is from Thupten Jinpa, explaining those verses about the correct view in the three principal aspects of the path. And so, for a long time, I used to say the three principles: renunciation, bodhicitta, and the wisdom realizing emptiness. And then I kept hearing my teachers say the first two, and the last one was the correct view. And then I had to say, what's the difference between the correct view and the wisdom realizing emptiness? And, the correct view is gaining the correct view that leads up to having an inferential realization. And so those verses are trying to help us get that correct view that will lead up to that inferential realization. And then the last verse is saying, then take this and go out and meditate. And so the last verse, I think, is saying, now, once you have the correct view, now meditate and gain the direct realization. Okay? Because the word realization can be confusing. I remember at the beginning, I always thought realization of emptiness meant the direct non-conceptual realization. Yeah, it doesn't. There can be the conceptual inferential realization or the direct non-conceptual one. Okay? And they're gained at different points in the path. And a sharp faculty disciple can even gain the conceptual one before entering the bodhisattva path of accumulation. But you have to have the correct view in order to enter the second bodhisattva path, the path of preparation, because the demarcation for entering that view is when you're able to have the union of serenity and insight on emptiness. And that's a conceptual realization. Yeah. So on the path of accumulation, the first path, if you haven't developed serenity before, you gain it then. And if you don't have the correct view before, you gain it then. And then you have to put the two together. And as soon as you're able to put them, to unite them, such that the analysis, when you're analyzing emptiness, the analysis itself brings the pliancy that leads to serenity, that's when you have the union of serenity and insight on the object of emptiness, because your emptiness is your object all along here, at that stage of the path. And then on the path of preparation, there's 4 parts to that. During those 4, then you're eliminating grasping at the subject and also grasping at the object. So with your inferential realization of emptiness, there's still an appearance of subject and object. Very slight, because your object is emptiness, but there's still that conceptual appearance that, that is like a veil. So the work you're doing on the path of preparation, in addition to accumulating a lot of merit, is meditating again and again with that union of serenity and insight on emptiness. And in the process, you're weakening that veil. Okay? So that veil is like, some thin cloth, and every time you wash that cloth, the cloth becomes a little bit more flimsy. And then at some point, the cloth just drops. And then when you have that direct perception of emptiness, that's when you enter the 3rd path, the path of seeing. And that's also the beginning of the bodhisattva ground. So at that point, you also are on the 1st bodhisattva ground. So what he's describing here is how to gain the correct view. Once we've got the correct view, like I said, if we don't have serenity from before, we have to get that. Then we have to unite the analysis of the correct view together with emptiness, such that the analysis brings on the pliancy that you need for serenity. Okay, so what we're talking about here is, gaining the correct understanding of emptiness. Because this came up last week when we were talking about it. So I've been thinking about it all week. And especially as we go through the verses, the 4th verse is of those 4 that talk about the correct view, is talking about not being captivated by either extreme view. So in order to not be captivated by the view of absolutism, which is grasping at true existence, or the view of nihilism, which is thinking that nothing whatsoever exists, all that has to be figured out before we have the correct inferential realization of emptiness. Because if there's any extreme view, we can't have that conceptual correct realization, that inferential understanding. And so that's part of the problem with the lower schools, because these people are quite smart, and they're really have done a lot, and they practice very well. But because most of them haven't negated enough, and so they're falling to the extreme of existence or eternalism or absolutism. There's many different terms for that. Because they're falling to that, they don't have even a correct inferential understanding of emptiness. And then the other people who negate too much, which it seems like perhaps people were doing when Buddhism, before Atisha came, or maybe around that time, because Jay Rinpoche was speaking so strongly against negating too much and people falling to nihilism. So similarly, if you negate too much and you start saying, well, nothing exists, then you don't have the correct view, and you don't have the inferential, realization of emptiness. So I think all this is being worked out to get that inferential understanding. And that same thing with the story that we hear all the time of the monk meditating on emptiness and grabbing his donka because he feels like he's disappearing. What's going on there is, he's really approaching the correct view, but the mind that grasps inherent existence is saying, but, I'm really here. Okay, so that story also pertains to somebody who's, working to get the correct inferential understanding. Because, and that's what they say, His Holiness says it a lot, that to get the correct view takes a lot of time, and it's very difficult. Once you get it, then, to really realize emptiness isn't so difficult. Of course, you spend one countless great eon on the path of accumulation and the path of preparation. So maybe, one half of a countless great eon on either path. So, okay. So once you get the inferential, then it takes you half of a countless great eon to accumulate the merit and to deepen your understanding before you get a direct realization of emptiness. That's if you follow Sutrayana. Yeah, that's why they want to get us jazzed up about practicing Tantra, because you can do it much quicker, but you need a lot of other conditions to make that happen. Okay. So I'll read the verses again. I think we talked about two of them, and we have the last two to go through. Okay? So one who sees the infallible cause and effect of all phenomena in cyclic existence and beyond, and destroys all perceptions of their inherent existence, has entered the path that pleases the Buddha. So that's when you're entering the path which pleases the Buddha. Okay? Then, after that, you go on to, so in that one, you're really seeing how cause and effect works, and using that to destroy your false perception of inherent existence. Yeah. Then you go on to appearances are infallible dependent arisings. Okay, sounds good. Emptiness is free of assertions of inherent existence or non-existence. That sounds okay. As long as these two understandings are seen as separate, one has not yet realized the intent of the Buddha. Oh, yeah, because when we're on the process of meditating on this, then it seems like, oh yeah, emptiness, everything is empty, and appearances, all those are dependent arising, but we can't put the two together as complementary. Yeah, when we meditate on emptiness, it's like all appearances disappear, so, we're really kind of going towards nihilism. When we talk about dependent arising, then our mind is concretizing things a little bit more, and we're losing the understanding of emptiness. Okay? And so at that point, we've not yet realized the intent of the Buddha. Okay? And so what's the intent of the Buddha? I think it's going to come out here, is the compatibility of emptiness and dependent arising. Yeah, that on the basis of one object, it is both a dependent arising and empty, and that those two facts about one object don't contradict each other. Something can be empty and it can be a dependent arising. Okay, but at this stage, when we think empty, we're going a little bit towards non-existence, and when we think dependent arising, we're going towards inherent existence. Yeah, and we can see that in our own mind when we think about things. Yeah, oh yeah, the reasoning of emptiness. Yeah, that's very good. And then things exist only as appearances. Oh, but everything appears to be objectively existing, so that must be how they are. Yeah. Okay, then the third verse. Okay, appearances are infallible, dependent, arising. Oh no, I said that. That was the second one. Okay, so when these two realizations of emptiness and dependent arising are simultaneous and concurrent, from the mere side of infallible dependent arising comes definite knowledge which completely destroys all modes of mental grasping. At that time, the analysis of the profound view is complete. Okay? So, only after gaining an inferential realization of emptiness are we able to see that dependent and rising are mutually complementary. At this point, we arrive at a full understanding of emptiness. Okay? Now the understanding of the dependent arising of phenomena, which is from the perspective of phenomana's appearance, and the understanding of emptiness, which is the absence of any inherently existent object, become simultaneous in the sense that they are not seen as separate and unrelated to each other. So here, and this is important, otherwise you get confused, here simultaneous and concurrent does not mean at the same time. Usually simultaneous and concurrent means at the same time. If that were so, then you would be seeing the conventional truth and the ultimate truth at the same time. Only the Buddha does that. Okay? So here, simultaneous and concurrent indicates that the meaning of dependent arising and emptiness converge to the same point. Okay? Understanding this, our analysis of the profound view is complete. Okay? So at that time, when you're able to see these two as complementary, then you have this thing where it said emptiness dawns as dependent arising, and dependent arising dawns as emptiness. And you may remember when Jeffrey was going through this with us. So this occurs after meditation on emptiness, before the correct view has faded from your awareness. Okay, so you're out of meditative equipoise, but you still have the effect of the understanding of emptiness in your mind, kind of like a hangover. They call it, your mind is informed by the view of emptiness, okay? So at that time, when our perceptions are still informed by the understanding of emptiness. Okay, so the great yogi and scholar Kedrup Nosen Gyatso expresses it this way, and I'll read you a quote from him. So, and then we'll explain it. So at the time of thoroughly completing the analysis of the view, through the mere dawning to a consciousness, which is a sense consciousness of the appearance of its own object, which means I see the striker, the sense object, that's appearing to my sense consciousness, then without relying on another reasoning or reason, so you're not doing any analysis, you're just having a sense consciousness that sees the object, just that, because your mind is informed by that realization of emptiness, an ascertaining consciousness that ascertains its object as empty is induced. So just by the appearance of this to a sense object, to a sense consciousness, the mental consciousness can ascertain that it is empty. In other words, just the seeing of the object, which is appearing truly existent, gives you the ability to ascertain that that's a false appearance and the object is empty. Okay, so you're not in meditative equipoise at this time. Yeah. Ascertaining is well, we'll just leave it with ascertaining. Okay? He used the word ascertaining. Okay. Just like, and he gives an example here. For example, through the force of prior knowledge that a double moon does not exist, a being with a defective visual consciousness induces the ascertainment that a double moon does not exist by way of that very appearance of a double moon to the eye. Okay, so here's the example. So because of the prior knowledge that a double moon doesn't exist, so you've seen a double moon before, you know a double moon doesn't exist, or maybe you haven't seen it before and somebody's told you that there's no such thing as a double moon. But you've probably have seen it because you're a being with a defective visual consciousness. Yeah, so you're always seeing double moons. But you have knowledge that the double moon doesn't exist. So just seeing the double moon induces the ascertainment that a double moon does not exist. And what induces that is the very appearance of the double moon to the eye. So isn't that interesting? The very appearance of something false induces in you an ascertainment, or you can say a realization, that that is false and it doesn't exist that way. Okay? So in this way, at the time of generating ascertainment of emptiness, when one thinks about the mode in which all phenomena, conventions such as causes and effect, exist, they are imputed existence posited as mere names only. Okay? So from that false appearing because of your familiarization with emptiness, you see it's false and you know that the object's empty. And, you've ascertained emptiness. And then when but it's not in meditative equipoise. Because I remember going on this with Jeffrey. It's not like, you're walking down the street and you see a daisy and then you see it's empty and all of a sudden you're standing there and you're in meditative equipoise on emptiness. Yeah. He said, no, it was, it's a conceptual understanding, but you are ascertaining emptiness. But then when one thinks about the mode in which all phenomena, conventions such as causes and effect exist, at that time you see they are imputed existence posited as mere names only. Okay, so you've seen the flower. It induces the realization that the flower is empty. Yeah, or induces the ascertainment of the emptiness of the flower. And then when you think, well, how does, here's that flower is appearing, but I'm ascertaining that it's empty. So you're thinking about, well, how does it exist? At that time, then you get it. Oh, it exists by being imputed and posited as mere names only. And so that's that's subtle dependent designation. Okay, so there's like different levels of dependent arising, and this is the subtlest one, dependent designation. Okay, so when we are able, without relying on another consciousness or another reasoning, so you're not doing analysis when you see this daisy, so without relying on that another consciousness or another reasoning, to ascertain the viability of all dependent arisings, causes and effect, agent, action, and object, and so on. Okay. With an awareness realizing these dependent arisings are empty of inherent existence. Okay. So you are realizing that they are empty of inherent existence. At that point, analysis of the profound view is complete. So the analysis of the profound view is completed in post-meditation time. Okay. When merely seeing or hearing about a dependent arising, such as a sprout or a person, prompts the understanding, here it's using understanding, not realization, prompts the understanding that it is empty of inherent existence to arise in our mind. That is emptiness dawning as the meaning of dependent arising. Okay, so that's when you hear that expression, emptiness dawning as the meaning of dependent arising. Yeah, you have the appearance of a dependent arising, and then emptiness dawns as that's the meaning of being a dependent arising. Yeah, that daisy is empty. Yeah, that skateboard is empty. Yeah. So conversely, when we reflect on the emptiness of a sprout, and this is in post-meditation, you're thinking about the emptiness of the sprout, of the daisy, the newspaper, the skateboard, whatever it is. Yeah, so you're reflecting on the emptiness of it, post-meditation time. We automatically know, without any other consciousness intervening, that that object exists dependently. So when you're reflecting on the emptiness of the daisy, then you realize, oh, that daisy exists dependently. Okay, so that's the meaning of dependent arising dawning as the meaning of emptiness. So you can see here, by seeing, the conventional nature of the object, it prompts an ascertainment of emptiness. By reflecting on emptiness, it prompts an, knowledge that the object exists dependently. And so for those two to prompt each other like that means that you're seeing them as very compatible. Yeah, that they come to the same point. They aren't contradictory in any way. And so that's the meaning of the analysis of the profound view being complete. Yeah. So it's not just the realization of emptiness. It's the ability to, you're at such a point in your understanding of emptiness and your understanding of dependent arising that when you see one, it makes you think of the other. When you see the other, it makes you think of the first one. Yeah? So I think that's pretty amazing, especially, when you think of that example about the double moon. Yeah. Here's somebody who sees a double moon, and yet because they know that from before that no double moon exists, the seeing of the double moon prompts the mind that says that doesn't exist the way it appears. Yeah. So maybe in a way you can say, when we see the face in the mirror, it prompts the understanding that it's not a real face. That's a much more superficial analogy, okay? But it's similar in the sense of, because of previous familiarity. So you've been a baby and you've tried to play with the baby in the mirror, and you know that that baby doesn't understand, and you've understood that there's no baby in the mirror. But the next time you see that baby in the mirror, just the seeing of that baby, then you know there's no baby. So then you don't try and play with the baby in the mirror anymore. Okay? So the true meaning of emptiness isn't simply that you can't find phenomena under ultimate analysis. The true meaning of emptiness, and this is, what Jay Rinpoche this is his forte, But also this is the point that His Holiness says all the Tibetan schools agree on. They may reach it in different ways, but they all agree on the complementary nature of dependent arising and emptiness. So the true meaning of emptiness isn't simply that you can't find phenomena under ultimate analysis. The true meaning of emptiness has to be understood in terms of dependent arising. Emptiness makes it possible for things to have a dependent nature. Yeah? So that's why they say that emptiness is the cause of all phenomena, or emptiness is the basis of all phenomena, simply because emptiness isn't really a cause. But if things weren't empty, you couldn't have objects that had a dependent nature. If things weren't empty, everything would inherently exist, and everything would be frozen and could never change. So it's like things have to be empty in order for them to exist. There's no other way for them to exist without their being empty. Okay? So the emptiness makes it possible for things to have a dependent nature, and this dependent nature makes it possible for things to function and to contact each other, so that cause and effect function. Okay? In this way, emptiness makes it possible for cause and effect to function. It is the basis that allows for the diversity of phenomena, each of which arises from its own causes and conditions. Okay? So because of emptiness, because things are empty, that enables them to relate to each other. And it enables causes to produce effects and effects to be produced by causes, and it enables everything to function and change. Yeah. Whereas if things had some kind of inherent nature that made them what they were, such that what is appearing to our sense consciousnesses and our mental consciousness is actually the way things existed, then there's no way things could function and change or do anything. Yeah? And so what's so strange is there you see that it's so strange because things appear inherently existent to us, and yet we see them change, and we don't find any contradiction in those two things. And that's what ignorance does to us. We think inherent existence and cause and effect are complementary. Yeah? So, that's how totally off base our mind is. This shows the two truths exist, and that shows how our experiences of suffering and happiness arise. Okay? So, the fact that you have dependent arising, you have emptiness, or you have emptiness and you have cause and effect. It's showing that you have ultimate truths and conventional truths. Yeah. And that makes possible our experiences of suffering and happiness. Yeah. Because as soon as cause and effect function, then, you can create the causes of suffering that produce the result of suffering, and you can create the causes of happiness that produce the result, happiness. Okay? When we understand emptiness in this way, it is possible to understand that our polluted consciousness can be transformed into the mind of a Buddha when it meets the right conditions. Yeah? So when you have, your analysis of the profound view is complete, then you really, get the confidence that it's possible to become a Buddha, because you can see that cause and effect function, and you can see that inherent existence does not exist, and so things can change. And so when you meet the right conditions and your wisdom can manifest and grow and increase and overpower ignorance, then you see that it's possible to eliminate the causes of samsara. It's possible to develop the good qualities limitlessly. So awakening is possible. Yeah. So this kind of relates back in Nagarjuna's Karikas. He talks about a proof of the triple gem. You may remember we went through that in Buddhism, One Teacher, Many Traditions. Yeah, and how just based on, because things arise dependently, they are empty, those two are complementary. The realization of that is the Dharma realization. You become a Sangha, then you become a Buddha. So the three jewels exist, and then, the four truths exist. So, yeah. Okay, to review, there is a distinction between the realization of emptiness and the culmination of the analytic process, when the analysis of the profound view is complete. The realization of emptiness begins with the correct inference, which is a negation of inherent existence. At this point, we have understood emptiness in terms of subtle dependent arising, dependent designation, but we have not actually experienced subtle dependent arising. Okay? So when we have the correct inference, which is a negation of inherent existence, we have understood emptiness in terms of subtle dependent arising. So conceptually, we've heard teachings about how things arise as dependent designations. We have that, we've heard that, and we've accepted that. We understand that at some level. But we have not actually experienced subtle dependent arising. Okay, so that's only going to happen when emptiness dawns as the meaning of dependent arising, and dependent arising dawns as the meaning of emptiness. in the post-meditation time, we fully realize subtle dependent arising, such that we can see emptiness in terms of dependent arising and see dependent arising in terms of emptiness. This is the realization of the subtle level of conventional truth and marks the culmination of the analytical process. Okay. Here, emptiness and dependent arising are seen not only as compatible and complementary, but also as reinforcing each other. Okay, so they're not just friends, but they need each other. Yeah, you can't have one without the other. It resolves the most difficult challenge of the Madhyamaka philosophy, which is maintaining a robust understanding of conventional reality while rejecting any notion of inherent existence, even at the conventional level. Okay, because that's the Svatantrikas, they say, oh, there's no inherent existence at the ultimate level, but on the conventional level there is. So that's so weird. You can see they have some understanding of the emptiness of inherent existence, but it's not complete because they only negate it on the ultimate level. And and on the conventional level, with cause and effect and things like that, they can't put emptiness and dependent arising together. They say for things to exist, they have to have some essence. And for, the grapefruit seed to produce a grapefruit, there has to be some grapefruit, some special quality in the grapefruit seed that makes it produce a grapefruit and not a rose. There has to be something in there that makes that happen. That's not just a dependent arising. Yeah, because they say if everything were only, this is the Svatantrikas, if everything existed only by mere designation, then you could call anything, and make it function like that. Yeah? I could call a radio an airplane and take off with it. Okay? Yeah, because they're saying there has to be something in that object so that it gets that name. Okay? And we can recognize this in ourselves, can't we? When we do some meditation on emptiness, and then our mind goes, yes, but, there's got to be something there. Yeah. It can't be that there's no me here. Yeah. There's got to be something that's really me. Yeah, I can't be that. We don't feel like I can't say there's no inherently existent me here, because the only thing I've ever known is an inherently existent me, and if I negate that, then I don't exist whatsoever. So not being able to establish dependent arising and cause and effect, and so that's where the fear comes in, because of that. Okay, then the next verse says, in addition, appearances clear away the extreme of inherent existence. Emptiness clears away the extreme of non-existence. When you understand the arising of cause and effect from the viewpoint of emptiness, you are not captivated by either extreme view. Okay, so discussion of falling to the two extremes of absolutism and nihilism occurs in the context of an inferential understanding of emptiness, not a direct realization. Yeah, Because if you have a direct realization that's non-conceptual, how can you still be holding an idea of absolutism or nihilism? Yeah. If you're still holding, even at a subtle level, one of those two, you can't have a direct realization of emptiness. Okay? All philosophical schools agree that understanding appearances prevents nihilism. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, think you have appearances, so that means that you can't say nothing exists. Okay. All philosophicals agree that understanding appearances prevents nihilism, and understanding emptiness prevents absolutism. Yeah. Okay. However, the person who is able to see this in the reversed manner, that dependent arising appearances prevent absolutism, and emptiness prevents nihilism, that person will never be captivated by either extreme view. Okay? So in order to completely overcome those two extreme views, it's not sufficient to say, well, things are empty and they depend and arise, so they aren't totally non-existent. And it's not sufficient to say, things appear inherently existent, but they're actually empty. Okay? So that's not enough. Yeah. What we have to do is see that appearances, the fact that there's appearances itself refutes inherent existence. Yeah. So you have to see that because there's dependently arising appearances, then those appearances can't be inherently, those objects can't be inherently existent. And you have to be able to see that because things are empty, therefore they can't be non-existent. So the way I see it sometimes is if you have the two extremes, okay, here's absolutism, things are inherently existent. Here's nihilism, totally non-existent, okay? Middle way isn't you put the two together and cut them in half. So middle way is not an average of the two. Middle way is a totally different viewpoint, not in this line, okay? But what helps you get to that view, usually if you have grasping an inherent existence, you meditate on emptiness to refute it. So nihilism is here, absolutism here, nihilism is here, okay? Dependent arising is here, a step in, and emptiness is a step in here. So usually when there's absolutism, we counteract that by it's empty. And when somebody falls to the extreme of nihilism, that's counteracted by having them meditate on dependent arising. Okay? But here, it's when somebody's thinking things are inherently existent, they can see they're not just by meditating on dependent arising. And when somebody's thinking things are totally non-existent, they counteract that just by saying, no, they're empty. Okay? So instead of existence being dependent arising, existence meaning inherent existence, you refute that by dependent arising. And instead of thinking total non-existence, that the ultimate truth is total non-existence, you refute that by emptiness. Yeah. So that's pretty amazing, isn't it? And to refute this, you don't go all the way here. And to refute this, you don't go all the way here. You just take a step in and see the two as they really are, without those two extremes. However, the person who is able to see this in the reversed manner, that dependently arising appearances prevent absolutism and emptiness prevents nihilism, will not be captivated by either extreme view. How does that occur? When we understand the true meaning of dependent arising in terms of emptiness, we will relate to appearances as mere dependent arising, not as inherently existent entities, as the absolutists do. Here the meaning of appearances is more subtle, in that phenomena are mere appearances which are free from inherent existence. So here, when you're at this extreme, the appearances are inherently existent. When you're able to counteract that, it's you see phenomena are mere appearances which are free from inherent existence. Now, how does something that does not exist inherently appear? That's the question. Because we're so used to inherent existence. You've heard me bring this issue up many times. What does that look like when you see it as a dependent arising? Okay. The fact that phenomena are empty of inherent existence indicates that, wait a minute. I'll start from the beginning of the paragraph. In addition, when emptiness is understood in terms of dependent arising, then emptiness precludes nihilism, because the fact that phenomena are empty of inherent existence indicates that they are empty only of inherent existence. They are not totally non-existent because they are dependent arising. Okay? So dependent arising and emptiness brings you in away from the two extremes. In addition, the understanding of emptiness strengthens the conviction in karma and its effects. In short, dependent arising eliminates eternalism or absolutism because we know something exists dependently. We know that it cannot exist independently because the two, dependent existence and independent existence, are contradictory. Since independent existence and inherent existence are synonymous or equivalent, then we know that inherent existence cannot exist. Emptiness eliminates the extreme of nihilism because if something lacks inherent existence, it lacks only independent existence. It still exists dependently. When we meditate deeply on any form of dependence, beginning with causal dependence, we come to see that the way objects appear to us is mistaken. They appear objectively existent out there as one solid object, whereas in fact there is a long history of causes and conditions that lie behind them that we don't see or consider. Yeah. They appear to us as one solid object, not as a series of ever-changing moments that depends on what came before it. Seeing the falseness of their appearance pushes us to realize their absence of inherent existence. This absence is a non-affirming negative, but not total non-existence. None of the lower schools assert that this absence or emptiness can be seen directly. For Vaibhashikas and Sautantrikas, the mind explicitly sees the momentary aggregates and implicitly knows they are not a self-sufficient, substantially existent person. Yeah, so these schools, just in the way they say you perceive how things actually exist, is in an indirect manner implicitly. Because what you are actually knowing is the impermanent aggregates. And from knowing the impermanent aggregates, you know that they are not a self-sufficient, substantially existent person. But you don't see that emptiness of self-sufficient, substantial existence directly. So I remember hearing this, when we study tenets. And in one of the Mind Life conferences I was at many years ago, His Holiness asked Sharon Salzberg if this was the case, because that's and the Theravada tradition that she practices, they're really aiming to see the momentary aggregates. And she said yes. Yeah, that this is how no self is perceived. But what's interesting is in the Pali tradition, the perception of no self is not the perception of nirvana. Yeah, that's something different. So there's some differences here. According to Chitta Matrans, all absences are imputed things or imaginaries, phenomena that exist only for a conceptual consciousness. So, according to the lower schools, you don't see selflessness directly. You see it indirectly, implicitly. According to Chitta Matrans, selflessness is an absence, and all absences are things that are merely created by the mind, imputed existence. They don't have any existence apart what was created for the mind. Because remember when we studied the three natures, the first nature was the imputed nature, second one was the other powered, third one was the thoroughly established. Yeah. So only Madhyamikas say that they can be realized, in other words, emptiness and selflessness, can be realized directly by a yogic, direct, reliable cognizer. Only the Madhyamikas can say that. I don't know if the Svatantrikas say that, or only the Prasangikas.
With seeing that something is a dependent arising, I can see that it couldn't be a dependent, inherently existent thing. But
a dependently inherently existent
it couldn't be an
thing?
independent. It couldn't be independent and inherently existent if it's
if it's dependent arising, it could be independent. Could not be. Yes.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Right.
That something that's dependent can't be independent. But to say that something is empty of being inherently existent means you can draw a conclusion that it exists, because that doesn't make sense to me, because non-existence also lack inherent existence. Mm-hmm. Things that don't exist lack inherent existence also. So I don't see how that conclusion's coming. The one side of it makes sense to me, that something that dependent arising can stabilize a realization of that something is not inherently existent, mm-hmm. but that something being empty can stabilize that it's not existent, that's totally non-existent, because even totally non-existence, the things that are totally non-existent are also empty.
Yeah, but it's saying that, because things means existent things. Because things are empty of inherent existence, they exist dependently. So we're not talking about non-existence. We're not using emptiness to prove. You want to say, the turtle's mustache inherently exists because it's empty of inherent existence.
I don't want to say it inherently exists. I'm just trying to figure out that emptiness showing that something is not
Okay.
not totally non-existent.
Okay, because
doesn't I don't
well,
see
it
any
does,
rationale.
because when you're saying emptiness, you're not negating all of existence. You're not saying empty of existence. You're saying empty of inherent existence. You're only negating inherent existence. You're not negating all existence. So, because things are empty of inherent existence, they can still exist dependently. Okay?
Yeah, I can see that. I just was thinking that they could also be non-existent because
No.
something.
No, they can't be. Why
Well,
could they?
Something can be empty and be a non-existent. Is what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
but they can't.
But they can't be a dependent arising and be a non-existent.
Right.
Okay.
And you can things. Yeah.
Empty, but there's no existence there.
Yeah, there's no existence there.
There's nothing to be empty of.
Right.
There's
If
They're
you're
empty of
no
in,
sky flower if there's no sky flower.
It's empty of inherent existence.
It doesn't exist.
All things are.
All things are selfless. But that's, just because you can say anything you want about a non-existent. Remember, yeah, we can talk about the marriage of the son of the barren woman. Yeah, you can say anything you want, but that doesn't mean that it exists. Okay. So just because, non-existence are empty of inherent existence doesn't give them any existence at all. And it doesn't give them any dependent arising at all because they don't exist. Whereas things that exist as dependent arisings, by their being empty, you can still establish their existence as dependent arisings. But things that are non-existent, whatever you say about them, doesn't establish their existence. Okay?
Yeah, I'm not trying to establish the existence
What are you trying
of
to
non-existence. I'm saying that
That
it's
you're-
them being dependent arisings that makes me realize they don't
Yeah, but you also
they're not
Right.
totally non-existent, but
Yeah.
I don't see how the emptiness.
right. So
does
so you're here and you're negating it by going here. So it's the next step to see that if you're here, you negate it by going here. Okay? So that part's not connecting for you yet.
Right.
That there's a difference between emptiness and non-existence.
I realize there is a difference, but I see it.
Anyway,
but I see it because of the dependent arising.
Yeah.
Not because. Yeah.
Not because, but you have to learn to see that dependent arising and emptiness come to the same point.
Yes.
So that if you can see it because of dependent arising, then the next step is to see, well, dependent arising and emptiness come to the same point. So get yourself to realize that the same holds true because it's empty. Okay? So it's what we're talking about is a progression here. And also so there's not only a progression in our understanding of dependent arising and emptiness, there also is a progression in our depth of understanding. Yeah? And so there's many, many, many different levels. So it's not just you realize emptiness so you don't realize it. Yeah, there's like all these different degrees of getting things together so that you can really see the whole situation. Yeah, like you could say you're either in the car or out of the car. That sounds great. But actually, between in the car and out of the car, there's a lot going on. Yeah? There's a lot happening. So when you really look at it, it's not just in the car, out of the car. It's a whole spectrum.
I think I got it. I've heard many times that when there's an inferential realization of emptiness, that one can turn their attention without any new analysis to another object
Right.
and realize that object.
Realize the emptiness of that object.
Yes, realize the emptiness of that object. Thank you. And so I assumed that that was within the meditative equipoise.
Yeah, that is.
But today, what you were describing sounded like that was happening in post-equipoise.
No, that's a different process that's happening
Okay,
in
all right.
post-equipoise.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. They're two different, because one is you're in meditative equipoise, you see the emptiness of the table, then you think about the microphone, you can see the emptiness of the microphone. This is with inferential understanding. But what we're talking about here is you come out of your meditation on emptiness and you see the microphone. And just seeing the microphone induces an understanding that the microphone's empty.
But both, it seems like both are inferential realizations.
Yeah, there's a whole spectrum
You're
of,
having an inferential
there's a
realization
whole-
out of meditative equipoise.
it seems that way, because you're ascertaining the emptiness of this. Yeah, why can't you have an inferential realization outside of meditative equipoise? It's probably not as deep as it is when the analysis is inducing the pliancy. It's not deep like it is, yeah, but it's still an understanding of emptiness. Yeah.
I want to thank you for these teachings because we often hear, everything is empty, but then you don't hear about dependent arising. It's like you're missing the other half, the picture. And just so I don't know why the texts there's so much emphasis on emptiness.
Yeah. But dependent arising is the king or queen of reasonings. The monarch, Jeffrey Finding made it, it's, gender equal, is the monarch of reasonings that proves emptiness.
Yeah, it just seems lopsided that, if you had to count the number of times emptiness was mentioned.
Maybe if you hear more teachings,
Mhm.
then you'll hear more about dependent arising.
Okay.
Yeah?
And then also the point about there being different degrees of realization of emptiness. Again, my conclusion has been you realize it or you don't. That's
Yeah.
kind of how it's presented. I mean,
Yeah, it
so
is.
it's nice.
It is presented very much
Yeah.
like that. But when you look at this whole thing, there's like all these subtle kind of things you have to put together to get the final whole picture.
So then someone has a question from online.
Uh-huh.
It's the Friends of Sravasti Singapore group.
Mhm.
And they say enlightenment is empty, but also a permanent phenomenon. They're asking, is enlightenment empty,
Oh.
but also permanent?
Okay, is enlightenment permanent? Enlightenment, do you know? I know, we can talk about the four Buddha bodies.
Do they mean
Yeah.
nirvana?
Uh-huh.
Do they mean nirvana? Do they mean nirvana?
No, are they talking about nirvana? Are they talking about Buddhahood? Are they talking about arhatship? Yeah, Buddhahood, the state of a Buddha, is that permanent? I'm not sure. I could say Buddha. Yeah, Buddha is permanent. Arya Buddha is impermanent. Okay, but Buddha, remember we did this in Precious Garland?
Buddha's finger is Buddha, and that's not permanent.
Buddha's finger isn't permanent, but Buddha is permanent because anything that, comes under the rubric of Buddha is Buddha. So once you have, the Buddha's true cessation, which is Buddha, and what we were saying yesterday, that anytime you have a collection of things, if there's something impermanent, then the whole collection becomes permanent. Okay? So you could say Buddha is permanent, but Arya Buddha, meaning the person who is a Buddha, the person is impermanent. Nirvana.
Yeah.
Nirvana's permanent, yes. Nirvana's permanent. Yeah, meaning that it's unproduced, unconditioned, doesn't change moment to moment.
Exactly does this phrase mean when your analysis of the profound view is complete?
Okay, that's what it means, is when you can see, the daisy, and it induces the understanding that the daisy is empty, or the ascertainment that the daisy is empty, and you can be thinking about emptiness, and it induces the ascertainment that, things dependently arise. So that's the meaning of the profound. The analysis of the profound view is complete. When you can see that emptiness and dependent arising come to the same point.
And what does it really mean you can see that cause and effect function?
It means that when you think about emptiness, you don't go to the extreme of nihilism and think nothing exists. But you recognize, because things are empty, therefore causes can produce results. Yeah. And if things weren't empty, causes could not produce results.
So the statement she just read is referring to pretty much the highest inferential realization then. And from there, meditating on that is when you're going to get a direct realization.
Yeah, well, you meditate on the whole thing inside meditation, in meditative equipoise, in break time. You have to put all the different pieces together at the different time to get yourself over that hump. And getting yourself over the hump from inferential to direct occurs within meditative equipoise. But you have to do all the stuff outside of meditative equipoise to support what's going on inside meditative equipoise. And a lot of what you're doing also is creating merit. And in the process of creating merit, seeing that the agent, the object, and the action are all dependent and empty. So there's a lot to hold in the mind and to really, have it sink in such that it really transforms how you look at stuff.